Most of my students are like always half asleep. Okay, let's see. I think we're almost all here. I think we're back to like the 61 number, right? So shall we
move on to the next slide?
Sure. Right, and so picking up sort of where we left off, thinking about the ways that you kind of regularize needs assessment, right? So just like in a classroom where you're like, okay, where are my students? And meeting them where they're at, right? Thinking about this kind of organic development of what engagement means and for whom, right? So the last slide was talking about context, and context matters, right? When you think about sort of, changing the system, right? And or smashing the system or dismantling the system, whatever metaphor you want to use to sort of fight against what's happening, which we, I'll discuss. There's various set of sort of orbits that are happening, right? So you've got the linguistic imperialism piece, you've got the racialization piece, you've got the sort of the lots of different inequalities that are happening, or whatever transformations that you want to sort of engage in needs to sort of take place from this kind of bottoms up, right? So we're not going to be like, here's the cookie cutter way to fix everything. And indeed, we've been working on trying to fix and dismantle things for years now. And we joined this sort of larger conversation with other scholars who are doing the same. And we invite you to join this, right? I think it's tiring, but it's also rewarding at some times, right? So thinking about the ways in which, if you consider education as this form of emancipation, right? Emancipatory education, according to education, very well-known education theorist, I can never say his name, Freire and Donaldo Macedo, right? That they talk about literacy, but the same goes for, I think they say similar things about education, right? This idea that it can only be emancipatory and critical in a way when it's conducted in the language of the people, right? So as we're doing it in a sort of an L2 additional language kind of setting, what does that mean? And through this process of engaging and learning and talking through one's native language, right? One can name their world, begin to establish a dialectal relationship with the dominant class in the process of transforming the social and political structures that imprison them, right? In this kind of culture of silence. And then thinking about the ways, are we as teachers, part of this larger perpetuation of this culture of silence? And we don't want to do that. And if we recognize that we are doing that, we need to stop, right? We need to change that that system, or at least start to change the system, right? So the person is, they also say that a person is literate only to the extent that they are able to use language for social and political reconstruction. So this kind of metaphor of like dismantling and building, I think is very useful in thinking about, how can I change what's happening around me, starting from where I am, right? So we encourage you to kind of think about this, and in the breakout rooms, you'll also have a chance to think about this. What does that engagement piece, what could it look like, and what would it look like?
And then in a similar line of research, some researchers have argued like language educators can be language policy planners in their own classroom. So thinking about yourself as like you are planning your classroom language policy or language practices. So you do have some autonomy, in crafting a space that your student will feel safe to voice their own feeling and concern. So try to be the kind of teacher who provide a space to liberate their voices instead of the kind of teacher who silence your students.
So it's in that dialectal relationship where it happens. And even when you have, and we've interviewed LETAs too, who say, oh, my LET is really restrictive in what they let me do, right? Even in that little space, let it be 2 minutes of conversation time in or out of the classroom, right? Where that piece can happen, right? It can be big or it can be very, very small, and kind of build out from there.
Right, and I will encourage you to think about your own educational experiences as well. What really kind of matter, or what you remember sometimes are those like little moments, because your teacher might have a very
remembered your name,
right?
Said it correctly,
correctly, or making effort to do something what they seem as a small, but you as a student, you remember that for the rest of your life, right? So thinking about those small moments that were making a lasting impact on your student, and don't underestimate your role as a language teacher in Taiwan.
Right. And it's not that you have to teach it like English as subject, right? It's that you can use English as a vehicle to do these dialectal relationships, right? So you can see that as sort of the larger picture. It's very frustrating to not be like, how come past tense? Oh my gosh, present perfect. But thinking about that in context of how do I open up those spaces for students through English.
So this will lead us to talk about teaching culture, because I know a lot of times you are probably expected to teach American culture, right? So what is American culture? This question, I think, deserves our critical examination as well. On the textbook, you probably will see culture being represented as something very static. But in reality, we do culture different ways, right? In my family, what I do as a Taiwanese family might not be representative of the rest of what people imagine Taiwanese family would do. And I would say the same probably will be applied to you. So be a little bit critical about how to teach culture, because in many, many ways, we probably end up teaching culture in a very superficial, static way. And in some way, it probably reinforce the inequality or power relationship that the student or teacher already have. But please do understand that when you are asked to teach culture, you are able to really weave in something that really matters to you. And you are the one who are adding a layer of diversity into your local students' interpretation of American culture. So you are actually in a really great position to push their maybe very simplistic, monolithic idea of American culture. Okay, even you are from the dominant culture from the US, you can try to do different things to include different facets of American culture. And I would say most likely this will stay with your students. Yeah, because you are representing something that they have not got a chance to learn or to hear in the major media, but then you are trying to introduce something that they hear for the first time. So for example, we encourage you to talk about Black Lives Matters, gentrification, or anti-Asian hate, or transnational adoptees. These issues might really open up your students' idea about what counts as American culture, and then how people in the US are not lived a single type of life that they oftentimes got from Hollywood movie or TV shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for example, I can just, right, so San Francisco, so I'm from San Francisco, and so oftentimes people are like, oh, Bay Area, okay, talk about San Francisco, teaching culture, what's San Francisco like, and Google, right? And so I think oftentimes the discourse revolves around, oh, it's so great, technology, and people are so tech savvy, but at the expense of things like communities getting kicked out, or because Googleplex is getting built everywhere, and where do they go, right? How long does it take for folks to get to their workplace because of gentrification that's happening in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, where I live and work, right? So we're thinking about even when you think about the interviews that we've done with transnational adoptees from China, right? They often tell us, oh, they want me to teach about what it means to be Asian American, but that's not something, like, my identity in the US has never really incorporated that. How do I tell them what Asian Americans' lived experiences are like if I am not quite that cookie cutter representation, this monolithic ideal. But at the same time, our transnational adoptees have said, this is how I leverage my identity. This is how I am able to, at least on the bottom-up level, talk about the ways that my life is like, and my culture, my family's culture, right, is like. And so students really have latched on to that according to our interviews.
So in this sense, I think that each of you are agent for change, Because even saying something like, oh, I did this in the state, but not all Americans do this. Even that sentence, it sends a message that there is huge diversity within American society. Yeah, so I would encourage you to think of ways that you can incorporate that in your curriculum. Yeah, so teaching culture, I know, is expected. Many of you have to do that. You have textbook, you know holidays very well. But even just saying that how you do that in your family, yeah, just adding another layer of conversation that really puts your student to go through some deeper reflection. And you can also ask them, how do they celebrate, say, Lunar New Year? And you probably will quickly notice that not everybody doing the same type of a celebration. And that really opens up some critical reflection and understanding of cultures.
Right. And another a person had mentioned in our interviews that, you know, the stereotypical representation of the family unit as a father, a mother, and 2 kids or 2.5 kids or whatever, they show their family photo of 2 moms and an adopted child from 2 different countries, right? So their family picture, comparing that picture to the textbook and kind of talking through, this is my family here. How is this different than what the textbook is saying, right? That isn't kind of this entry point to students understanding true cultural diversity that's being represented.
Exactly. So here comes our last slide.
And so we just wanted to, we have a reading list that we'll forward to Kevi for you to examine. But in case you were wondering, like, JET program, which has been around since like the 70s, is the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, which I am also an alumni of. There are lots of critiques about it, the good things, the bad things, right? So we can send that along to you. A decent number of work on Asian Americans in Asia, African Americans working in Asia, and we're clumping it as because it's just, the slide was only so big, but there are a lot of kind of very intersectional identities that are woven in there as well. Jenks has a really cool book about being mixed race and working in Asia in the language teaching profession. So this is specific to, I think, maybe some topics you would be interested in as ETAs. Adoptees, there's some work on that as well. And then if you're thinking about things like, okay, I want to know more about, I'm a novice teacher, I want to know more about like the field. There is actually a lot of work. We just chose 2 selected works by really awesome scholars who are based in Asia, Race and Decolonization of Practice in the TESOL Profession. So happy to send that along to y'all. Okay. So Kevi has, oh, no, this is you.
Yeah,
go for it.
So we have been talking a lot. We kind of want to know how you feel about it and then what you have learned from our talk. So we're gonna put you all in a breakout room, and here are 3 questions, or 2. Yeah, 2 questions that we want you to talk about with your peers. So, well, what is one action plan you will take in pushing back against linguistic imperialism and incorporating diverse voices or experiences as you prepare yourself for teaching in upcoming school semester? We are hoping that our talk kind of give you an anchor to think about this question. And we also want to know whether or not you have any doubts or concern that you still have about teaching in the upcoming semester. Yeah, we would like to be here to show our support and maybe offer some like opportunity to converse. So we will let you talk in small group for about 10 to 15 minutes. And we will still have ample time that we can reconvene as a whole group, and you can share if you feel comfortable. You can voice out your answer, or you can type in the chat. That will be also the Q&A time for us to answer or answer any question and concern that you have. Okay, so Kevi, would you be able to help us putting them into breakout room? Thank you so much.
Oh, here we go.
Oh,
hello,
nice.
welcome back.
Welcome
hello,
back.
Oh, hello.
Yay.
I love it when, okay, just as, I love it when people in the room like wave back to me. I'm like, are you all here? So thank you, those of you who are, being kind viewers.
Coming back, 20.
Yay.
21.
Okay, we're almost there.
Going up. Exciting.
So Kevi doesn't need to go into a room and like get people.
Yeah, like
You're okay.
I don't think I need to.
Awesome. So I'm gonna let Ming take the floor. I'm gonna also open my chat here.
Sure.
Oh,
So we
can actually close this too,
okay.
right?
You want me
so
to
we don't
stop
need to.
sharing?
Yeah. Stop. Great. Cool.
Excellent.
All right. Now we see all of y'all.
Yeah, we are actually very curious about what you have talked. Yeah, so feel free to share in any ways that you feel comfortable. If you would like to type in the chat, feel free to do that. Or if you want to raise your hand.
There's a button, I think.
Yeah, there's a button at the bottom and you can let us know. But basically, Jen and I are very, very excited of having this opportunity to share conversations like this with you. And then this is the opportunity for you to provide some feedback to us or just share what you have thought about this talk and then moving forward, how this might help you in any ways. So anybody? And don't be shy.
Okay, I'll start.
Great, thanks.
Hey guys, my name's Jimmy. I'm going to be a Penghu ETF, but I'm currently in Minnesota where it's dark out, and I don't know when I'm going to get. Anyway, okay, it doesn't matter. I think one of a good way to combat linguistic imperialism, and specifically what we were talking about of English speakers being from one different spot or being able to tell your experience as an American, is to bring your friends into the picture. I think that a good lesson that I did when I was at Taidong ETA in 2018, 2019 was we had everyone sent postcards to a bunch of my friends who who don't have the same ethnicity as I or different background as I, and then after the postcards were sent, we brought them in via Skype at the time. And if they were willing, if you want to get your, maybe Venmo them a few dollars, or maybe say you'll get a cute postcard from a student in Taiwan, which is a pretty good gig as well. I mean, you bring them in via, especially now that we all know how to use video messaging, video chatting, you bring them in and it's a great Q&A session. You can bring a bunch of people and be like, hey, look, this is my little spot of America. This is my little spot of America, things like that. Not just putting yourself as the one resource, outsourcing, I guess.
Absolutely. This is a great piece of advice. Very practical, and then really introduce different facets of American culture to the local kids. So you are no longer the only, say, authority, right, to do that job, but you share the responsibility. Summed up. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Or it could be questions to us.
Hi, so Alden here. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all again. We talked a little bit about basically allowing students to use L1 in the class for the sake of sort of validating their own cultural background. We maybe have learned from TEFL courses that it's so important to be using L2 all the time, but we want to give them that space to basically express themselves and to be comfortable with sharing. We also find that it's important to allow students to sort of break out into groups, to be sort of out of the spotlight and think about things in a slower manner, maybe use a little L1 before jumping back into the discussion and using L2. And also accents. We also talked about the fact that everyone's English is valid. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. A sort of American accent is not the default, and that whatever accent they speak with is just as important as any other.
That's great. It's great that you are incorporating all the workshop lessons that are being imbued to you all. So that's great. It's exactly kind of the latest and greatest of language research and language teaching research really is talking about this idea of translanguaging, utilizing and leveraging, right, all the multiple repertoires, linguistic repertoires that are available at your disposal, right? And that's how real communication is, right? You don't just kind of go about your day into one language and only one language, right? When you listen, and even people in Taiwan, right, don't do that. So thinking about how do you reflect real world language and language use in context, which includes, I think, very brilliantly, right, accents, exposing students to various accents, Singaporean accent, Hong Kong accents, Korean, Konglish, right, Korean accents. So thinking about that and providing your students with that input is super important.
Yeah, to be very honest, I don't feel comfortable with my accent until I would say probably just a couple years ago, because I always speak English with that Taiwanese accent, and I feel a little bit, I guess, ashamed until I finally got into TESOL field, knowing that that is part of my identity, and I should feel proud of that. But growing up in Taiwan, learning English as a school subject, I always have the idea that British accent or American accent is the way to go. But because of my tongue, I couldn't pronounce some of the pronunciation, and I often miss the final consonant. So I feel really embarrassed. Okay, but then having the opportunity to work in the US for many years, I realized that, hey, it's really about the content that matters. But I didn't have someone to tell me that when I learned English. I spent so much time trying to fix that small TH sound or some long vowels. And
or
then
the R or the L.
Right. And if I have known, if my English teacher could tell me that as long as you get your meaning crossed and people can understand you, then you don't need to worry too much about your pronunciation. And I probably will feel more comfortable speaking in public and not taking so many years to overcome my own feelings. So I think you will be the one who could do that job earlier in your students' English learning trajectory.
Yeah, and also thinking about growing up in the US, my parents are immigrants, and so they had accents, and thinking about the ways that them having accents, kind of, I internalized certain ideologies about people who have accents or the competencies about people who have accents. And I had an accent as a kid, and listening to my own kind of recordings or videos of myself, like, what? I sounded like that, right? And I kind of unlearning that and getting your students to also think about unlearning or chipping away at these ideologies that are not static, right? So they are changeable, and they are, I mean, my parents they got along just fine in life with an accent for, they're now 70, right? So thinking about that, do we all need to speak one certain way? No, of course not, right? Mm-hmm. I see a really great question about navigating working with an LET who is really focused on accent reduction, but it seems wrong to focus on, yes, yes, which rewards having a certain American accent. That is definitely something we've seen.
It's a tough question, because it's also about your relationship with them, right? Are you feeling comfortable to challenge them? Would that endanger your relationship with your kids and them, right? So I would say try to, well, I'm not saying my answer is the only way to go, but I would encourage them to think about when you spend more time on developing some other skills, you might see much greater progress, like how your kids can start to express themselves more freely without worrying about the accent. And then you can kind of show them, this is what I do with them, and see what the kids can do. I think most of the time that probably will surprise them a little bit, because once the kids' attention were drawn to focus on their pronunciation or accent, most likely they stumble a little bit more, and then the depth of their conversation might not as deep. So I hope that you can kind of try out different ways to get your students' attention away from accent and pronunciation. But then if the pronunciation are really off to the extent that you cannot understand them, then of course you need to spend some time working on some elements, right? But then I just hope, like, overall you are in the good direction, in the right direction to go, and I'm sure that your student will be able to show some progress that would hopefully persuade your LET.
Yeah, and I think this is a classic sort of accuracy versus fluency, right? It's not that you should only focus on pure accuracy, because nobody talks like that. But at the same time, getting students to work on fluency, even if it's okay to make mistakes, right? When you think about our, you can review this recording because it's recorded, how many mistakes we all make, I make too, right? But it doesn't detract from you understanding this whole 2-hour talk, right? We hope, right? And so kind of thinking about, when you look at real song lyrics, right? Movies, sitcoms are full of so-called linguistic errors, right? Or language play, right? Like accent reduction, I think is a thing. People are really, some people really do buy into it. But I think the more examples you kind of bring in to be like, and you don't have to be, all aggressive about it. You can be like, hey, like let's look at this and let's analyze like how this person uses this type of speech and why, and is it useful and is it effective, and right, these kinds of conversations without kind of like letting the teacher lose face for like, oh, you're doing this wrong. I mean, there are schools of thought, and maybe that is one school of thought, right? Yeah, thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's a great one. Anybody else? Could be comments or question like this.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Brittany. In the US, nighttime lighting is not flattering, but I will share with you what I shared in our group in terms of combating linguistic imperialism.
Thank you.
So one thing that we could do is use, hi Carly, use associative learning. And I know it's a little bit controversial to use for second language or additional language learning, but associating some English words with heritage language words. So when they're thinking of them, they kind of think about English and heritage language in tandem, and it kind of brings it to the forefront. And then also in another way, it's kind of showing we are interested in your heritage languages too. Like, this is something that you should be proud of. This is something that you should care about, or that is good to care about. And so that's kind of what I had in mind.
Great point. Well, growing up in Taiwan, whenever some quote unquote foreigners ask me, oh, how do you say that in Mandarin? How do you say that in Taiwanese? The first reaction that I have for myself is like, oh, what? So are you interested in my own language? Wow. Yeah. So it's a kind of eye-opening kind of experience for me. Like, oh, what I know matters. And I always thought that it's my responsibility to learn English, to be proficient in English. And I don't know that this could be a mutual, like a relationship, right? If you show some interest in my own language, in my own culture, it's really validating who I am. And then I know that, wow, what I know have some weight in this global community. Instead of just like English is the only way to go, you have to be proficient in English, right? So that is a great way to start with. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and your story or your comment reminded me, Brittany, of I was talking to somebody who was an elder in Taiwan, and she said, "Oh, I don't speak any English." But then she said something. She said, in the morning I saw her, so she knew I was an English teacher, and she's like, "Good morning, good morning." I was like, "Good morning," like bone touch you, right? Good morning. And and my friend was like, "She's trying to say good morning to you, good morning," right? I was like, hey, that's really cool, right? So to the extent that she was trying to communicate with me with all the linguistic resources, whatever sounds that sounded like good morning to her, I mean, I think it's a lot of people use this. I thought it was really unique. It was the first time I heard it, right? So these kinds of examples, and it's being like, hey, it's okay to use these kinds of, tools to help you. Doesn't, right? People do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I brought
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this time I brought my kids from the States to Taiwan and attend the local schools. So they forgot some English. So when they learn new English words, they use Burpa-Merpa, the local alphabets, to note the English pronunciations. And then I think it's fascinating, like how they can just have several different tools to help them learn English. Even though in the past, I oftentimes heard some local teacher would comment that, oh, using this way to learn English, their pronunciation would be off, would be like a Taiwanese accent. But the thing is that as long as they are trying to learn, I think that is something that you need to praise them. Because after all, for young kids here in Taiwan, once they step out of your classroom, they don't have an opportunity to hear English unless their parents spend extra money to send them to English cram school, right? Mm-hmm. So putting kind of these in mind, try to make them feel really proud that they are making initiative, making effort to learn a language that they don't necessarily get to use and hear, right?
Yeah, I think we have about 3-ish minutes if you all have, wanted to debrief or talk through or comment on your conversations. Thank you, those of you who have been sharing examples in the chat and speaking out. We appreciate it.
Or do you think this conversation is helpful in any way?
So they're like, no, not at all.
Kind of push you to share something. Anybody?
And it's okay to sort of think about it and let it sort of marinate or ruminate. I think in November, y'all have another, event that allows you to sort of talk through things like this. You can also think about, doing some of the readings that we suggested, also kind of talk through it, or having reading groups. I know that's really nerdy, but like if you want to sit together with your fellow ETAs in a small group kind of just to discuss and debrief them that way. I found those, we used to do that in grad school, right?
Yeah.
It was really effective.
And even just do an emotional check-in. I think that's very helpful. Because after all of you have different LETs, have different students, right? So the dynamic of your relationship with the local people is gonna be different. But then sitting together, finding a time to listen to others struggle or the gains, I think that will be very helpful.
I agree. It is very helpful to hear everybody's experiences. Oh yeah, that's actually our last slide. Oh wait, that's a great comment.
Oh, my last slide.
I can actually share this here.
Or do you?
How privileges are fluid. Yeah, very true. Something that thinking about. It took me quite a long time to also think about our privileges as university professors, right? I think some of the ways, and college educated folks have, even at certain marginalized identities, right, more privileges being college educated from the US, whatever that means. Right. So kind of thinking about that and keeping that in mind. Okay, my entire screen, a tab.
Yeah, we do have list our
emails.
Give
us 1 second. Sorry. That was a great comment. We forgot to share that. Tab. How come?
Or do you want to
use yours?
I already logged out.
Oh, you already logged out. Okay. Oh, actually, does this help? Oh wait, you know what? Can we just drop it in the chat?
Yeah, can we type it in the chat?
We're slow. We're university educated, but we're clearly not that bright.
Yeah, but thank you so much for all the comments. Yeah,
this is mine, and Ming's is here.
Or I can also share with them later on. I'll put it on Google Classroom.
Okay, well, just in case, right? We're literally in front of our computer. Sorry, it took us this long to think about that solution. We apologize. It's not late at all here where we are. All right. If you don't have any additional questions, feel free to email us if any arise. We want to make sure, be mindful of your time and sleep. So please get rested. We look forward to maybe engaging with you more and seeing you in person at some point in time. I'm here until January. Cool.
Okay. Thank you for all the comments. Yeah.
I'll wait here.
Thank you.
So actually, I hope that we can re-invite both of you to join their conversation. So probably after several months, then after you read the article or experience Taiwan more, then you have more thoughts to discuss with both of the professors, and they will give you some suggestion. And So that's it for the session. So thank you everyone
Thanks
for
for
joining.
showing us so much love. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. My students never do this to me. So I was like, oh my gosh, people say nice things on chat.
You don't have to, but
Yeah, thank you.
really.
Sorry, that was like totally unsolicited. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so see you guys in the afternoon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.